Hello, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate Rural Talk Radio Network, which is a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Our mantra at Passionate Rural Talk Radio is educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guest may not represent those of the station or the host. Folks, I always have phenomenal guests on. And today I have another phenomenal guest on who I just met recently. And my guest today is Joseph Carrabis, who is an author and writer of several books. Today Joseph is going to discuss his new book called Search, the First John Chance Mystery, which I had read about. Sounds very interesting. And I can't wait to hear Joseph talk about his book. So I want to welcome Joseph Carrabis to Chatting with Betsy. Welcome, Joseph.
Howdy. How is everybody?
Well, I am doing pretty good today, Joseph. Thanks. And you're doing okay up there in New Hampshire? You're up in New Hampshire, right, if I remember?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Joseph, I'm going to ask you what I ask all the author and writers, and I have to say this. I have come to really appreciate doing this show, talking to so many different writers of what goes into a book. And, you know, I used to just pick up a book, take it for granted, but when I start to realize in talking to all different people the research that goes in, I tip my hat off to you and all the author and writers out there, because it's just fascinates me. It really does. I'm fascinated by everyone's book that I have looked at, I've read, or reviewed. So I want to ask you, what motivated you to write this book?
Well, Search is an outgrowth of my previous novel entitled The Shaman. And one of my first readers for The Shaman, there was one chapter in The Shaman entitled Search, which was kind of a very high-level overview of this novel, Search. And so this gentleman is reading the novel, The Shaman. He comes to that chapter, and he says, isn't this what you were talking about before one of the other days? You were talking about some book you were researching about a murder mystery in Maine? And I went, yeah, that's part of the Shaman story, and also part of a separate novel entitled Search, which actually I've been working on since 1978. For everyone who's listening to this discussion, you can hear the gray in my beard. But I started researching it in 1978 because it was a fascinating story to me. And every once in a while, I'd make another attempt at writing it, and nothing was working. It was a great story, but I couldn't get the voice right. I couldn't get the tone right. I didn't know enough about the characters involved. Even though I had done research, I'd driven up to this place in Maine. I talked with newspaper people, with police, and everything else. So because I had written The Shaman, and I knew that character's voice and tone and what that character was like, I could take that one chapter and go, okay, now I can write this, because now I understand this character really well. And that became The Shaman, and I still had all my notes. I still had my preliminary drafts, which were all horrible. There were some really good scenes, but by and large it was poorly written, because I didn't really know how to write back in the 1970s. Some people might say I still don't know how to write.
Well,
go ahead.
No, I had to laugh. We're always our own worst critic, aren't we, Joseph?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I look at some of my stuff and I'm like, why? What was going through? You were on drugs when you wrote this, right, Joseph? this is like a bad trip you were on, you know.
So is your book, Search, is it based on a true story?
Yes. Excuse me. It's based on a triple murder that occurred in Maine in 1973. It was not a serial murderer. It was just a guy who killed people. And I reworked the story so that it has a uplifting, if you will, outcome. I didn't want it to be this ultimate bummer where this guardian and the two children he was taking care of were killed. So one person still dies, the other people still survive. But pretty much all the incidental things that are in the novel Search were based on stuff that I actually found in my research. It was very convoluted. Everything in real life is very convoluted, I find. Very rarely you'll find a straight line from point A to point B in real life, especially when people are involved. So
yes.
This dealt with drug running. This dealt with marijuana farms up in Maine. It dealt with the mafia moving into Maine. It was like, wow, okay. What else goes? Give me the kitchen sink while I'm here. It'd be a lot easier.
Well, it does sound fascinating. So then your book, Search, that is a blend of fiction and nonfiction together?
Correct. You would probably classify it as creative nonfiction, but
okay.
Largely fiction, because we're a number of years past the point, and I couldn't get in touch with all the principals to get all their sides of the story. And also, the main character is someone who was trained initially to be what some people might call a shaman. I'm hesitant to use that term, even though it's the title of a book I wrote. But he was trained in a bunch of esoteric practices and kind of tossed them aside when he was in high school and college. And because of wanting to find these children, he begins using them again and again and again. So there's also this paranormal, metaphysical aspect of discovering who you really are. What is your real purpose in life? What are you meant to be? What are you meant to do? That's actually the main aspect of the story. The murder mystery kind of rides on top of this. It's the reason that everything else occurs.
That's interesting that you said, what are you meant to do? Because sometimes in our lives, we are in a journey we never expected, and we say to ourselves, why me? And then it turns out that it was meant to be used for a higher purpose, that you would have no idea that you would be doing that. It's just like, I could use myself as an example. I never, ever in a million years would have thought I would be talking on internet radio and interviewing people, but or start a support group. But it's because of my husband's diagnosis with Alzheimer's that made me go in that direction. So I can definitely understand what you're saying, because sometimes, we never picture ourselves doing something that we would, I would have thought about doing a show. I to be honest, I'm still amazed that I do it, but you never know. You really don't know what life has in store for you. And a lot of people think, paranormal and metaphysical might be a little woo-woo, but you know what? There's things that happen, as you know, Joseph, we can't explain. We just can't explain it.
Yeah, and going back to we don't really know our purpose in life, I'm sure everyone who's listening in, and you and I, we knew people in school and in college who studied one thing. They got their degree, if you will, in some one thing, and then never touched it in their lives. It's kind of like, yes, I got a degree in British history. I am now being an engineer for Vista or something. It's kind of strange how life puts us where it needs us, not where we necessarily need to be. And I think one of the goals in life is to always look for the good. It's kind of like you didn't anticipate doing a talk show, discovering all these things about yourself, about your husband, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, that's where that's where the universe needed you to be to do the miraculous things you did. And that's, all of us have the ability to do miracles. It's not like you have to be a wizard or a genie or, a character out of Tolkien fantasies. We all have the power to do miraculous things. It's just being willing to do them. Feed the hungry. That's miraculous. Work in a hostel. That's amazing. Care for someone. There's more opportunity to be amazing than people realize. Just go out and find one that works for you and do it. You'll feel better and you'll be benefiting others.
It's
I'll
true.
get off the
That is really true. I just want to say this, people, and I hear it, and because I'm in a lot of support groups, and I hear it all the time. Oh, I can't live anymore. I can't go on because my spouse, partner, mom, dad, whoever passed away. And I'm like, yes, you can. There is still life. And I'll tell you what, I am so grateful to be alive and healthy at 66, that they're going through 2 caregiving experiences, that I just want to enjoy life and help as many people as possible. And that's my attitude. It wasn't always like that. I was not always like this. I was not always positive. I was very negative. I was very pessimistic until I flipped my script and flipped my story, because I have such an appreciation for life after seeing people lose theirs, that you really do learn to appreciate life. But I digress. I'm going to get back to your book. I'm fascinated, Joseph, about people's writing process, the creative process. So what's your writing process like? Do you already have your characters and dialogue in your head, or does it just come to you as you are writing?
In the writing community, that question is often phrased as, are you a pantser or a plotter? A plotter meaning write down the plot, and you have all the things down there, and it's basically you've already written out the entire novel's outline, and you just follow the outline. You're writing stuff according to the outline. A pantser is someone who writes by the seat of their pants. They have no clue what's going to happen. They're along for the ride. So they're sitting in the passenger seat and just holding on. And I've talked with a lot of writers and authors about this. And what I have discovered is that people may say, oh, I'm a plotter. I do everything by an outline. Or I'm a pantser. I just sit down and whatever happens, put it on a page. But the truth of the matter is everybody does both. Stephen King has said publicly that he just sits down and he writes and he watches to see what his characters are doing. And I believe that. And if you ask him a little bit deeper, you talk some more or listen to some other interviews, and he says, I always have an idea in mind that I have to write to. Well, okay, you've got a plot point. You're writing to some goal in your novel. So I do both. There have been books, like one of my novels, The Augmented Man. When I originally wrote that, it was written as a novella. It was about 50 pages or so. And I knew the last scene. That's what came to me, was the last scene. So I had to, because I saw this last scene, I saw the characters involved, and I wrote the novel towards that, or the novella towards that last scene. And I just put that away for a while. Okay, good. And I took it out again and I read it, and I went, no, there's a lot more to this story than this. So by the time I was done, I knew the major plot points. I knew I didn't know all the chapters, but I knew what had to happen at certain points in the story. Let's say there were, the novel I think is about 90,000 words, about 400 pages. So I knew that these 10 things had to happen to get to the final scene. Okay? What happens between the first and the second? Okay, that's being a pantser. I'm just going to sit down and write and see how do I get to the second plot point. Okay, I got that done. Second to third, third to fourth, fourth to fifth, and so on. Now the real kicker is that last scene never shows up in the final novel. And when we were going through the final edit of The Augmented Man, the last scene was essentially in there. And I read it for my last time before we had it published. And I realized that I could create essentially a cliffhanger ending. And there was a second novel, not a series, but a sequel, that I had in my head, but I had never written down. It was kind of like, boy, wouldn't this be interesting? So boom, there we go. Now I'm mapping out the second novel. There's only going to be two, I swear to God. There's only going to be two. And the final scene is the final scene in that second novel. So it always shows up. It always ends up there. Another novel that I'm working on, it's a work in progress, is Richie and Phil, Celebration of a Life. And I was driving through the city, through the town where I live, and I came to a stoplight. So I looked to the left to see if the traffic was moving, coming towards me. And instead of seeing traffic coming towards me, I saw an entire novel written out. Front to back,
wow.
Every scene, everything you can imagine. I had my phone with me. So I pulled over to the side of the road, and I had my phone, I put it on record, and I just began dictating the entire novel. So that is all essentially, the first pass is done. Now I have to go back and read through it. The actual daily process of writing, I know what scenes have to occur. Like the thing I'm working on now is we were talking about Search, which is the first John Chance mystery. I'm now working on The Alibi, which is a John Chance mystery, another one. And I know the major points to each chapter. So I am writing to those points. And now we're going back to, I know the plot points. I know what has to happen. I'm just writing like the interlegnum to get from one point to the other. You mentioned, do I hear the characters in my head? Susan, my beloved wife, partner, and princess, we can be having dinner. And sitting at the table having dinner, and all of a sudden I'll just look up and away. And she says, oh, who's talking to you now? Because I will hear the conversations my characters are having to each other. I will hear them in detail. And I have to go I literally have to go write them down. If I'm driving, I have to get out my phone and repeat them, dictate them into the phone. So I very often will know the conversations. And if I get stuck, I rarely do, but if I get stuck when I'm writing, not a writer's block, but just I can't figure out what happens next, I take a moment, I get away from the keyboard, I take a walk with the dog, and okay, who's talking? Who's talking right now? Who's saying what to who? And boom, there it is. There's a conversation. Because I hear the conversation, I can see what's going on, who's talking to who and where they are and what they're talking about, and I can write all that down. The other
That's
part
fascinating.
Sometimes
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I find it fascinating.
Thank you. I do what I can. Sometimes I want a story to go a particular way, and it stops cold. And it's very frustrating because I want something to happen. But my characters are saying, no, I would never do that. No, that's not our story. That's your story, Joseph. Go write your own book about yourself if you want to do that. This is our story. Write what we're telling you to write. Okay, fine. I'm a victim of my success.
I love it, Joseph. I think you are fascinating. Just listening to you, I could tell that you definitely have a very creative mind going on there. I mean, it just amazes me. I really am amazed, and I admire writers because I have enough trouble writing a blog. A book. And I often think when I'm reading a book, I think this every time I read a book, and I read a lot of books for the show. What was the writer thinking? How did he or she come up with these characters, the background, and the research? I've had writers tell me, I did like 6 months of research to write a couple of paragraphs. I mean, that's mind-boggling to me.
Yes.
It's just, I find it very interesting and fascinating, because I always wondered that when I would be reading a book. I don't know if other people think that, but I do. Like how much research went into this book.
Speaking for myself, a lot of research. I would have to. I've been a researcher most of my life, and I would have to say that aside from the actual writing, research is one of the most enjoyable things to me, because I love discovering new things. I love, finding out little tiny intricate details which add so much realism to whatever you're writing about. Some of the novels that I've written, I'll give you a really good example. I happened to be on a call yesterday, and one of the people on Monday I was on a call, and I happened to ask one of the people on the call where she was from, just out of curiosity. We're waiting for everybody else to show up, and she said Halleck, Minnesota. And I doubt you've ever heard of it. And I went, Halleck, Minnesota, north of Fargo? And she went, yeah. And I said, I used Halleck in one of my novels, An Empty Sky. It's a town. It's one of the major characters comes from Halleck, Minnesota. No. And she said, why did you choose Halleck, Minnesota? You only have 600 people. And I said, that's exactly why. Because you only have 600 people. Everybody knows each other. That was a key element to the story. It had to be a way isolated community, out, far from everything, not on the beaten track. And she was amazed how much I knew about Halleck, population 600. And I went, oh yeah, I did a lot of research. I went on Wikipedia. I actually got on a plane and drove through Minnesota to find it. And she went, wow, you must have a really good GPS because we don't show up. Yeah, I did, as a matter of fact. But it's stuff like that, because I was able to do research and figure out and find and go through Halleck and see what it was like. In the book, people are saying, wow, I know that town. You know Halleck? No, but I know towns just like that. I know a lot of towns just like that. Good. Done. When the reader believes what you've written without question, you've done your work. You've done a good job.
Yes. I know as a reader, like there's books I'm there. Like I'm in that story. Yeah. And, words from a book can just touch you. And I know this might sound a little crazy to some people, but there's some words and sentences in a book that have literally just got to my heart and changed my way of thinking and inspired me. Mm-hmm. That's when you know, I guess as a writer, you nailed it, when you get feedback like that.
Exactly. When people tell me that they were crying at the end of one of my novels, and that's a good thing, because I tend to have very emotional endings to my stories. I go, yes, yes. In my short stories, Dancers in the Eye of Kronos is a love story. It's a short story. It's a love story. And not only women, men as well, have gotten in touch with me, emailed me, called me, found me on Facebook, Twitter, or whatever else, to let me know that they read the end of the short story and they were either in tears or holding back tears or choked up. And I went, yes, yes, good job, Joseph. Pat yourself on the back. You did a good thing. I'm thrilled when I find out that a reader had some kind of emotional response to one of my stories. It doesn't have to be a wonderful, overwhelmingly powerful. It can be an amazingly negative. I don't mind, really, because that tells me that I touched something in them, that my writing affected them. The person who, they're reading one of my novels and they could care less, it's not interesting, one of my stories, big deal, who gives a crap, and they don't remember it, that's a reader that I've lost. That reader's not going to want to read anything by me again, because I didn't do much for them. I didn't do anything for them. I wasted their time. But my regular readers, the people who contact me regularly, they always say something about, I read this in your novel, and oh my God, I know those people. I live with those people. How did you know that was part of my family? Those people were in my family. That's my cousin. I know that person. And, well, that's my cousin too. We're related, and we didn't know it. My sister, she reads my stuff, and she goes, did we grow up in the same house? Yes. It
is amazing. And I really want to encourage the audience. You read a book that you really enjoy that's touched you, reach out to the author. Reach out to them on their page, or go on Amazon. Their book is on Amazon, and leave a review, because they're really the writers I talk to, they want feedback. They want to know, either positive or negative. They want to know how they touched a reader, and I try to do that now, if Amazon lets me, to write a review. And there was a author writer I interviewed last year, and his book touched me so that I told him that the words that this character said at the end of the book really just touched me, and he really appreciated hearing that.
Yes.
So I just really want to encourage the audience. When you pick up that book, I really want people to know what goes into that. Years of research sometimes. The writer pours their heart and soul into the book, and they do want feedback. And you know what? I never realized that before, Joseph, until I started to interview several, author-writers.
There are some authors, I am sure, who don't really care or don't have time or, whatever. Speaking for myself, I love learning what people think of my writing and, my storylines. And one of the things that I find fascinating is, I work really hard at my craft. I literally practice, like if you're going to be a concert pianist, you have to play piano every day, several hours a day. If you're going to be a stage performer of any kind, you have to really work at honing your craft and developing your skills. I do the same thing with my writing. I practice my writing every day, little exercises, much like one would go to the gym and lift weights or do the exercises, do the aerobic machine or something. I do the same thing, sitting down, give myself work to do that's purely developmental in my ability. And when I hear from a reader that it comes down to two things, they really liked the book or they really hated the book, okay. But the one thing that always comes through is the writing is superb. I've had some very negative reviews on Amazon, one-star reviews, and they did not like the story. They did not like what was written. It offended them. But the very last paragraph is that the writing was really good. The author, meaning me, really knows how to create emotionally driven characters and tug at your heartstrings, and his ability to create dialogue is among the best. Good. My craft is good. My storyline may not have appealed to. I don't think my stories are going to appeal to everybody. But, you know,
right.
I'm not a single genre author. I primarily write fantasy and science fiction, but I also write horror. I write literature. You know, I'm one of those people. I write mysteries, crime. I kind of write whatever strikes my fancy. But what is unique, I guess, about me, all of my regular readers, no matter what type of book they're reading, they said, your genre is Joseph. I can always tell, even if your name's not on something, that you wrote it because your style is really so powerful. Good. That is excellent for branding, Joseph. You know, there's another Joseph Carrabis book. It's rotten for marketing because bookstores don't know where to put your book on a shelf. Well, is this mystery? Is this romance? What is this, fantasy? What is this, you know? So it's kind of funny that I have developed my craft to the point where my voice is that unique, something that every author or writer wants to do, so that your work is really known and stands out as being yours. That's your signature. And at the same time, it's not that good because now bookstores are scratching their head. Well, you know, what is this again? Where do we put this? Is this classic literature? No, he wrote it in the 1990s. What is it then? Oh, just put it on a bookshelf. I don't care, you know.
Well, I think, Joseph, that, you know, as the saying goes, your book, which book it is, may not be everyone's cup of tea, and that's okay because there's, you know, different strokes for different folks. There's, you know, some books that, you know, you may not care for as a reader, but the writing is still good. A person just might not care for the story or the ending. Sometimes people don't like the ending of a movie. People don't like the ending of a story. But I think that it's just I admire writers because to write out not just one book but several books, to me that's like a mind of a genius because all these different characters, all these different stories, all the time of research, I really do admire people like you, Joseph, that just write, and you write with heart and soul and passion, and I just appreciate writers now. I do more than I ever did before, and it's because they're doing the show and talking to writers.
Thank you on behalf of all authors and writers everywhere. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. Were you always a writer, or did you have a different career?
No. Well, I sold my first short story in 1978. As I say, as your listeners can tell, I have gray in my beard. But no, I owned 3 companies. Susan and I created 3 companies. The first one did moderately well, and we sold it. The second one did horribly, and we got out. The third one did amazingly well, and we basically said, okay, we've had enough. There's only so much you can do, and we turned it over to other people. But if you look at my resume or my profile on LinkedIn, you'll see things like I was in the United Nations New York Academy of Sciences Scientists Without Borders program. I was traveling around lending my scientific expertise hither and yon. I was a chief neuroscience officer for a company. I was a chief research officer. I've been a truck driver. I've been an apprentice butcher. I've been a lumberjack. I've been a homeless person. I actually was invited to contribute recently to an anthology written by people who have been homeless or are homeless. And I said, yeah, geez, I do remember having to live on the street, living in my car. And wow, would you be willing to write about that? I said, oh, okay, if you give me a little bit of time, I will, sure. People who have a linear life path, that must be wonderful. I didn't. I had twists and turns. Going back to what I said earlier about life does not give you a straight line. You just walk the path you're on. And hopefully you're smart enough to know, oh, I got to make a turn here. It's not very useful to try to push a mountain out of your way. Walk around the mountain or walk over it or walk, choose a different mountain when you can push, I guess. I don't know.
Well, you've had a very interesting career, and, now you have another career as you've been having a career as an author and a book writer, and I just find you fascinating, Joseph, and I think the audience should pick up your books, and I think they will find your books fascinating. And I highly recommend for people to do that. Where are your books? Do you have an Amazon page with all your books on there?
Yes, if you go to Amazon and look for Joseph, and my last name is Carrra, B as in boy, I-S as in Samuel. If you type that into the Amazon search bar, I'll come up. All my books will come up and all the anthologies I've been in. You can come to my website, my blog, josephcarrabis.com. That shows you how creative I am right there. I use my own name. You can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook. Feel free to reach out. Feel free to say hi. I'm always interested in wanting to talk to people, learn more about them.
Well, I'm glad that you reached out to me on LinkedIn. I'll have to look you up on Facebook and connect with you on Facebook. But I thank you, Joseph, for coming on and sharing your books with us, your interesting life. You are so welcome to come back again when you have another published.
Very good.
And I'd like to encourage the audience. Folks, I only have so much time to interview a guest, and I really like to encourage the audience. Go on my guest website because you will learn so much about the guest, more than they can say on a show. And because we only have so much time. So go on josephcarrabis.com page. It will be in the blog. So all the information about Joseph Carrabis will be in the blog that Jeannie White, her station manager, writes. And Jeannie produces the show. So thank you. Jeannie's the station manager, Passion World Talk Radio. And I want to thank you, Joseph Carrabis, for coming on, sharing time with me today. And I really enjoyed talking to you. And I want to thank William Caldwell, who's CEO of Passion World Talk Radio, that makes this all possible. And I want to thank you, the listeners. Thank you for listening and subscribing. And if you don't already subscribe to Chatting with Betsy, I don't know what you're waiting for. It's for free. I'm on Apple, Spotify, Spreaker, Amazon Music. You can find me there. and I appreciate it. If you would subscribe, you can leave a review if you'd like. And please tell your friends, because I'm here to be a resource. And I'm here to help people know they're not alone in this world. And if you want to check me out, I'm on Facebook, Betsy E. Wurzel, Wurzel. And I have a support group, #Kick Alzheimer's Ass Movement. And everyone is welcome. And that's all I have to say today, folks. And as I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you could be anything, to please be kind, shine your light bright, because we all need to do that now more than ever. Let's light up this world with our kindness and warmth. And do I sound like I'm a hippie from the 60s or 70s? No, I wasn't a hippie, but I did grow up in the 60s and 70s. And I just believe in showing love and bringing back our humanity to each other. And thank you. And we really, need that. And I believe that. So this is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passion Real Talk Radio, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Till we chat again, be safe, everyone, and be chatting with you soon. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.